I think we'll get started. I'll introduce the speakers here momentarily. We've got a great panel of people with different views and perspectives on the grizzly bear issue. And obviously, on Thursday, it'll be a big day for bears in this town and across the country and around the world, indeed, about Yellowstone grizzly bears and their fate and whether or not the 2017 federal decision to remove their protections should stand, or if it should be overturned. And the judge is expected, in federal district court, the judge is expected to make a ruling either possibly late on Thursday or within the next couple of days. And particularly important here is the beginning of Wyoming's trophy hunt, which is slated to begin on September 1st. So that's why we think the judge is going to rule one way or the other or on Thursday or shortly thereafter. So my name is Louisa Willcox, and I'm with Grizzly Times, a long-term grizzly bear advocate and advocate of wild country. A lot of familiar faces in this room, and glad you all can be here today. So my name is Louisa Willcox, and I'll turn the mic over quickly to Johnny Arlene, cultural and spiritual advisor of the Salish Kootenai tribes, and we have with us Rick Bass, writer from Northwest Montana, and if you've followed his work, a big fan of the grizzly and very, very knowledgeable. And we also have with us Deidre Bainbridge and Judy Huffland from Jackson, Wyoming. They just got in. They're with a new group, Shoot 'em with a Camera, that has been purchasing successfully, acquiring hunt permits. Several of their network has acquired hunt permits in Wyoming in areas that are really key to the grizzly bear's future, and Deirdre and Judy will talk a little bit more about that. We're waiting on, trickling in, I think, soon, is my husband, Dr. David Madsen, who's down at the Roxy troubleshooting the program tonight and sort of audio-visual glitch. But he has been involved in grizzly bear research for decades, 35 years. Grizzly bears and mountain lions. They're retired from the federal government and has strong views. And if you come to the program tonight at the Roxy at 5:30, you'll see David do a very classic David thing, a science guy thing, about this fabulous shared journey, epic journey of grizzly bears and bison and people, of course. So thank you all for coming. And without further ado, I think I'll just turn this over to Johnny Arlene. Thank you, Johnny.
Is this mine?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. My name is Johnny Arlene. My Indian name is Choatle. Choatle means to build fire for sweat. It was given to me when I was a little boy. I was raised by my great-grandparents, and every time we had visitors, my great-grandfather would tell me, "Hush," which means go. "Hush, Choatle, go build fire for sweat," usually for the visitors. And after a while, one of the elders says, "Your name must be Choatle," because every time we get here, he says, "Hush, Choatle." So the name stuck with me, but there's a long story behind it which has a meaning for me, for the sweat lodge. And I'm here to support the non-delisting, I guess, or whatever it is, of the grizzlies. Grizzlies to us, and the Indian people, in our Indian world, in our stories, our legends that take us way back thousands of years of the creation times. These coyote stories, as they call, are parallel with the Bible. That was the means of correcting our children, of their behaviors when they did something wrong. A story was told. This is what the animal did, this is why it looks like that, and this is why you shouldn't do this. And so we learned from these animals. You know, the creation came, I guess, as tall people were created at the beginning, then shorter people. Then finally, the animal world came in. And the animal world was here to prepare the world for the coming of the human beings. These were the stories that we had, and through all of this, all of those animals had a special role in our way of life. Some stayed behind to be food for us. Some were clothing. Everything you can think of, the animals were here. And we were told a long time ago that you don't disturb it, you don't bother it. Plants, as they grow, you can look at it, you can study it, but don't dig it up. Water, very precious. Mother Earth's milk. We must keep it clean. The air and the fire. All of these elements that we're supposed to be taking care of. That's our duty. These animals have taken care of us years, and now it's our turn to take care of them. And that's where I am here, to support this group here with the grizzlies and all the animals, all the animals. Not only, I guess as the sign says, it's grizzly time, it's all the animals' time. We have to be good humans to take care of these animals. They've given us their lives. They give their lives for us to feed our families. And we have rules behind our hunting when we hunt, as to be having a good heart when you're butchering, when you're killing, to make a clean kill, not to wound, to make a clean kill so that you can bring this home to your family. Many things that have been taught to us, and we still practice this on our hunting. We try to pass this on down to the younger people, to give thanks to the Creator as we make our kill for our food, so we can bring it home to feed our families, to feed our guests. And then all the medicine plants that grow, that we give back to Mother Earth what we have taken out for use. We didn't gather in a big abundance. We gathered just enough to keep us through the year for people that needed doctoring or so. All of these we had great respect for. And right now we're in a endangering part where they're going to turn the grizzly bear to be trophy hunted. Why? We don't eat the meat. Where's the carcass going to go? It's just going to be the hide and the claws, the head, be mounted someplace to look at. It's just in the respect of all the people that go out and take pictures and brag about things, going out on the fishing. Get out there, snag a fish, and work at them for half an hour, bring them in, get a picture taken, turn them loose. When we caught a fish, it was to eat. We never threw back. And it's kind of crazy, you know, and I think what's really behind this is the dollars. The people want to make money on something. To kill the grizzly, endangering everybody. It's our fault that they're down below into our places. We're moving up higher into the mountains. We're logging roads all over the place. We're disturbing their home grounds. So they come down to lower grounds. And then they hurt somebody. Crazy world. We just need to leave things as is. We're living okay, we're doing okay, we don't need to brag. This is one thing that the Indian people were told a long time ago. They were raised from a very small time. A baby in a womb was being sung to it all the time. When it was born, there was 2 elders that were appointed to give this child a name. And as it grew, they had the different teachers. Mama had to care till 10 years old. After 10, then uncles and aunties would get in, uncles, grandpas, dads, to help raise the child. 12 years old. 12 years old. Can you imagine this 12 years old? Your child, 12 years old. At 12 years old, they were considered adults at that time. You could leave the child at home to take care of the home. Can you do that today, Or even to a 35-year-old person. So these things were taught to the young children of raising, to always speak the truth. To speak the truth. Never to lie. And you were taken for your word. You were taken for your word. If you said something, even if you had a dream of bad, something happening, you reported to the chief. He didn't say, go on, you're just a little kid. They depended on all the dreams, the visions, to guide them. If they were on buffalo hunts. When we went to buffalo hunts, we had to hurry and get things done. When they were raised, the children were always told, hurry up, do this, do that. They weren't being mean to the children. They wanted them to learn to be fast. So when they got to the buffalo fields, they could cut meat fast to go, because we had enemy out there that would want to steal our horses, our women. So you had to learn things fast, and you spoke the truth. You never lied. The chief had the responsibility amongst all of his people to watch over them. His people, all of them, he'd say, this is my children. He'd make decisions for when it was time. He'd tell the people, all right, it's time to keep your children quiet. Someone has passed away. I know in my raising, I could go outside to play, and my great-grandmother would tell me, you be quiet. There's someone that passed away some miles away. In respect for that family. And so we did that. You always learn to take care. When you made your kill, like I say, we made offerings for it, to send it on its journey, for this animal that has given its life for us to feed our family. And we had to be in a good mood when we killed. We didn't go gutting through. We took our time as to massage the animal that has been taken. To massage it down. So we're going to bring this home. If we had people that were with us hunting, they could take a part of this game. But once it came back into the lodge, it wasn't the man's no more. It was the woman's responsibility. The woman could do whatever she wanted with it. She could pass it out to everybody. But her responsibility, too, is to have a good mood while she's preparing the food. She didn't want to be grouchy and just throw all of this meanness and madness into the food, because you're going to feed your family. You're going to feed your guest. So it was always in good respect all the way through. The hides were used for moccasins, clothing. The brains were used in the tanning. The horns used for tools. The hooves used for ceremonial purposes. All of the parts of the animal were used in a good way. We never bragged. This is one thing that was told to the people. You never bragged. You never said, I did this, I did that. It was for a person's responsibility that say out on the battlefield, you have a friend, a companion. It is his responsibility to tell on you. When we get back to the village, your friend will tell on you and say, he did this, he touched this, he stole this from our enemy. There is one time in our ceremonies when he's allowed to talk, to speak, to tell on his deeds that he has done. there's a certain ceremony that goes, and they escort him out to in front of the tribe, and they sing the song. After that song is over, then he says, "Oh, go ahead," and he tells his story. I did this, I did that. There was great respect all the time for all the animals, all of them. I don't know which animals are going to be next on the list to be disturbed. And we need to protect all over the world. There's natives all around the world that speak in the same way I do, probably, on behalf of the animal. But I'm hoping the Creator will kind of help people out there in the outside world to understand a little bit of our brothers and sisters, of the water, the fresh water. When we take a drink of that water, we always give thanks. We bless ourselves, we cleanse ourselves. There's a nice story that goes behind that. It's a little long, so I won't get into that, but it's a wonderful story. So I just kind of overlay where I'm coming from, and I kind of want to leave the floor here, I guess, for questions. Is that what you want?
I was going to maybe have comments from the other people.
Okay,
presenters, and we'll
sounds good.
Just relax on your questions.
Sure,
Thank you, John.
yeah.
Thank you so much. So, next up, I think, is Doug Lafleur, who is a very interesting Missoulian with an amazing athletic background and also coming from a tradition of hunting, which is one of the issues in this case. So, thanks, Doug, for being here.
Hi, I'm Doug Lafleur. Was a professional athlete throwing the javelin from Missoula, Montana, and grew up hunting and fishing since I was a little kid for food. Pretty much with Johnny coming before me, said a lot of things that I would probably just repeat. A lot of my feelings towards this has everything to do with our intention and the energy backing why we want to hunt or why we hunt, and those intentions backing how it nourishes us, how it's used with the earth, and our role in this, and how we share this beautiful planet with everything. So with this trophy hunt on the grizzly bears, I don't see it as a necessity thing. I do not see it as to feed our families or anything other than the fact that it's an ego-driven thing for domination over a species that deserves much better. And all of these efforts that we put in the last 40 years seem to be strictly monetarily on how the grizzly bears value for us to kill it or hunt it. And what about the love for the bear as another being that we're sharing this planet with? It seems more like we love what they offer us, and this goes back with what Johnny said about a lot of these animals, is we seem to love what they're offering us, the thrill of chasing them, hunting them, harvesting them for this, and not really having a deep-rooted respect for what they're offering us. And so for me, getting involved with this is hopefully we get enough people standing up with a high enough level of consciousness or awareness of all of the animals and the earth that we can share this and spread this and expand it so more and more people become aware of our ability to share this planet with these animals.
So next I'll call upon Rick Bass, who's an old friend, author from Northwest Montana, well-versed in grizzly bear issues, and kind of embodies a point that a number of people, scientists like my husband, but others have been making, which is you can't recover individual populations like the Yellowstone, like the Cavity Yak, like the Selkirks, without a broader vision of the connected whole. And so Rick is coming from the Yak, the other side of this great region. So thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Louisa. Thank you, Johnny and Doug. Beautiful comments. I feel awkward in the presence of y'all's grace and gentility. I get pretty angry pretty easily, and it's a negative emotion. And you know, the Grizzly brings out the best in us, and it brings out the worst. You guys have celebrated the Grizzly so beautifully. And being kind of on the negative side of things, which I'm struggling with, I find it ironic that the trial that's coming up in Missoula this week is and I'm wearing this hat. It's like such bad manners of me to have a hat, you know, and I should take it off when I talk to y'all. But it's got Save the Yellowstone Grizzly, which, like Grizzly Times, is a very small, valiant nonprofit group fighting for bears. So I'm advertising, but it doesn't sit well with me. It just feels really awkward. So, you know, why is the NRA, why is the Safari Club suing to kill grizzly bears? I thought their business was with armor-piercing, cop-killing bullets. Why do they want to kill Montana bears? Why does Idaho and Wyoming want to kill Montana bears? I'm really proud of the state of Montana for saying, you know, let's study this. We're not ready to go there yet. This is a little rushed. The science is all over the place. We've got people saying this, got people saying that, and you know, hats off to David Mattson and Louisa and Jesse Logan in this regard with white bark pine, western cutthroat, West Slope cutthroat. Things are changing really fast, and there may not be any science for what's happening. And global warming and climate change, again, Dr. Madsen has incredible, elegant models showing what is real, what is now. 95% of white bark is functionally extinct. This is what allows the females with young to stay up in the high country and get their protein without having to come down into the valleys to fight the big males over dead bison, because the females with young are going to lose those fights. They're not going to get that protein. Yeah, that protein's in the ecosystem, so on paper it can replace white bark pine, but as it plays out, it can't really. The science is not good. The math is different from the science, and this decision to delist prematurely was made on math, not science, not Dr. Mattsen's science, not the science of climate change. So I'm really proud to be in with these small nonprofits that are just working pretty much on volunteer basis to help protect Montana's bears, to help protect all bears south of Canada till we get this sorted out. You know, again, Madsen has this incredible science. Jesse Logan has this incredible science that I urge any of you to dig into on any of these websites if you're interested. The Yak Valley Forest Council has some incredible science by Dr. Craighead and Dr. Jonko of Missoula. There is, it seems, an all-out assault on grizzlies south of Canada. I mean, why is British Columbia protecting their grizzlies? Then they come across the border and they're not being protected. It's premature, but to simplify it, what I always think about is if you were wearing a 70-pound fur coat in this weather, how would you feel? Where would you go? And how would you behave? I think we're seeing behavioral adaptations that nobody has ever studied before, and the bear is being asked to carry the weight of our climate change, and it's not right, and it's certainly not scientific. So it's really excited and anticipatory to see how this case against the NRA and the Safari Club goes. Thank you for having us in.
Thank you, Rick. And introduce next a dear friend, an old friend from the other side of the Yellowstone ecosystem in Wyoming, Deirdre Bainbridge. A little tiny snippet on Deirdre. She comes from a hunting tradition and background as well. And one of her major professors in college was Starker Leopold, who maybe some of you in this room know Starker's father, Aldo Leopold. So a long and proud tradition of conservation that Deirdre learned from at an early age, and she's going to come up with Judy Huffland, also from Jackson. And we'll have a couple of, I think three more Jacksonites coming in the next day or so for the festivities and activities on Thursday. So thank you, Deirdre. Thank you, Judy.
Thanks, Louisa.
Thanks, Louisa. This is Deidre Bainbridge. I'm Judy Hoffland. In early July, a group of people who love bears got together, and we decided to brainstorm on what we could do to help protect the bears. A lot of it was because we thought it was just too early, for a year ago for the bear to be delisted, and, Wyoming to be the state that allows up to 22 grizzly bears to be killed seemed really scary and extreme to us. So we came up with this idea, Lisa Robertson, one of our colleagues as well, to apply for tags. So Fish and Game would be happy because we'd be paying for the application fees, but anybody who did it with our support had to agree to shoot it with a camera, not a gun. And it took off like wildfire. It was crazy, and it really signified to all of us that it's a minority. It's a really small minority of people who actually want to kill grizzly bears. We believe that the majority of people would rather drive through the parks, get the excitement and pleasure of seeing these beautiful animals, help tourism in all of the states where these beautiful bears are. And that started shooting with a camera. And we got a lot of esteemed people to sign up, a lot of not real, active non-hunters like Jane Goodall, and to sign up to agree to, support the economy, but not kill bears. Personally, for me, I got involved here because I fell in love with Grizzly Bear 399. To me, she is the ultimate mother. I can't believe what she's done so successfully to protect her kids. You guys should read about her if you don't know about her. So the thought of a bear like 399 or any of these beautiful bears, being killed for a trophy is, pretty devastating to all of us. So we're here in what we're hoping is a real, high road, positive way to help protect the bears.
And I'm also shooting with a camera, and I'm also a lawyer. So in 2009, when 399's cub 615 was shot by a hunter, it was at a time when the bear was not relisted yet. And so I advocated really, really hard for the hunter who shot 399 to be prosecuted because I knew it was not an act of self-defense. I had run into her on the trail, and I knew that she ran away from people quite appropriately. And I hiked the trail where she was killed almost every day with my dog. So we succeeded in having the first self-defense in the state of Wyoming case tried against the shooter of 399's cub 615, but nothing happened. He was prosecuted, he was convicted, and the fine was $500. He had no loss of license, he paid no statutory fee, which for the death of a grizzly bear illegally shot is $25,000. And when I looked into how to prosecute that case, there is no law on how self-defense grizzly bear is defined. There is no law on what is the jury instruction for self-defense grizzly bear. So I know for a fact that there are not adequate regulatory mechanisms in place in Wyoming to protect the grizzly bear, and that the grizzly bear that is now in the area of Jackson Hole and in my yard in Area 78 has been illegally attracted there with the gut piles by Wyoming Game and Fish, hunting in areas that they should have reassessed and said, no, we can't hunt here because it's now in neighborhoods and it's going to attract the grizzly bear to neighborhoods. But instead of stopping and reassessing and continuing the elk reduction, they continued to hunt the bear in neighborhoods. The bear now is in neighborhoods, including one adjacent to Judy's home, and they're being killed because they've expanded. They've expanded so far that they're so far out of the park, they're overflowing from the park and they've expanded. No, they've actually been attracted to the wrong places by the wrong people who are not managing them to protect them. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Judy. So next up is my husband, back from technical glitches in the Roxy, David Madsen. One short little thing about listening to recently an interview, actually doing an interview and listening back to it, with Earth Justice's attorney, Tim Presso. And when I asked him sort of, so what's your view on delisting? And it was like the words could have come out of David's mouth. I mean, it was, so science on Thursday is really in court. It's the grizzly bear, the fate of the grizzly bear in court, but it's also science and scientific inquiry. So, thank you, David.
So briefly, I guess I'd just like to emphasize why science is again a center of attention in court this time around. The analysis by the Fish and Wildlife Service has yet again failed in many ways and at many levels. Just as you might recall, the Fish and Wildlife Service tried to delist Yellowstone grizzly bears back in 2007. The courts overturned that, basically told the Fish and Wildlife Service that they had failed to adequately assess the consequences of losing whitebark pine. And whitebark pine was a major source of food for grizzly bears in the ecosystem. Well, as it turns out, this time around, yet again, the Fish and Wildlife Service has failed to adequately assess the consequences of losing whitebark pine. More specifically, the fact that by virtue of bears compensating for loss of whitebark pine, by eating more meat, we have ever more bears dying because of meat-related conflicts. For the first time ever, we have grizzly bears eating lots of meat from livestock. That's part of the compensation that's gone on. And as a result, they're dying in exponentially greater numbers because of those conflicts. Likewise, despite the fact that bears have always scavenged gut piles, we've seen an exponential increase in that behavior. And as a consequence, ever more bears, an exponentially greater number of bears, are dying because of conflicts with big game hunters. They seek out the areas where big game hunters have killed elk and thereby run into more of them and get shot in self-defense. So the Fish and Wildlife Service completely, utterly neglected to inquire into this dynamic that's been entrained that has resulted in record numbers of dead bears for the last 3 years. And it looks like this year as well, we're going to have a record number of deaths. We haven't had any increase in the population going back 15 years. And during the last couple of years, there's been the suggestion of a downturn. I suspect that that will become more accentuated in the future. So there is good reason to be concerned about the failure of the Fish and Wildlife Service to look at this unfolding dynamic. Just one other thing that I want to emphasize too, the recovery plan that dictated the terms under which Yellowstone grizzly bears are being delisted was last revised before 1993. So how many years is that? It's a lot of years. But the point is, you could make a book out of all of the relevant science that's been published since 1992. And none of that is codified in the recovery plan. Perhaps most importantly, the recovery plan says we can recover this population with 500 bears isolated. Just about all the research that's been done since 1992 has shown that that does not constitute recovery. That does not constitute viability, especially over the long term. We need several thousands of bears. And to achieve that goal, we need to have connectivity. And perhaps as much to the point, rather than us rolling our eyes and saying, can we ever have several thousands of grizzlies? Yes, indeed, we can. There are ample prospects for having that many bears. It just takes deploying the tools we have in the toolbox to promote coexistence and a little more generosity on our part. So I won't say anything more than that other than to lay out those two facets of what's problematic on the science front that has brought us to court. Thank you.
So I'll just open it up to questions for any of us up here. So fire away. Yeah.
So Fish and Wildlife has said that they will likely propose delisting for the bears in the NCDE by the end of this year. How do you think the outcome of this case will influence that proposal?
I can take that. I think it'll be a big bucket of cold water if the federal government loses this case in Yellowstone. They will have to reconfigure their thinking before they move forward. So that's the short answer. I don't know if any.
The main stumbling block is going to be on the issue of what's called distinct population segments, and that the grizzly bears in the lower 48 were listed in toto as one unit. So the Fish and Wildlife Service has gone ahead and carved out Yellowstone to delist that segment. And courts elsewhere have ruled that that was illegal in the case of wolves. So that's playing out this time around. And if we win in court on that issue, then that will call into question, first of all, moving ahead with delisting Yellowstone grizzly bears, but also carving out the other populations to do this separate.
One of the things I'll add is Nick Arrivo is the attorney for the Humane Society of the United States, who was one of the lawyers involved in litigating this issue successfully on that involved ultimately the relisting of Great Lakes wolves, and he's arguing the case for Humane Society. So the issue is very much in play in Yellowstone with grizzly bears as well as wolves. Fish and Wildlife Service had a chance, by the way, to get it right. This was flagged for them a number of years ago, and they just said, we don't like what the lower court did on the Great Lakes wolf, and we're just going to move ahead. And then they lost the case to the Humane Society on appeal. So they've got this ruling that should hit the pause button, but hasn't yet.
A question. Connectivity, all four populations, subpopulations, essentially functionally isolated. 4 bears in 50 years have gone from the yak into the cabinet, or the cabinets into the yak. Across a half-mile corridor, there's not enough bears to create a territorial imperative to disperse. NCDE, Yellowstone, they're still isolated. Why? Where's the science that says the way to enhance connectivity and dispersal is to shoot any bear that comes out of the park? That's what we're asking for, and then we're going to kill them when they do it?
Any other questions? There have to be other questions. Yeah.
I got one.
Yeah, go ahead.
What do you say to folks who claim that the grizzly hunt will make bears more fearful of people and avoid some of those conflicts, over livestock, over crops, over things like that?
Yeah. You want to take it too?
Amen and hallelujah, brother. Yeah, so that's a common claim. All we can rely on to inform that issue is anecdote and assertion. There's virtually nothing by way of hard evidence, one way or another, really. As people have often said, as I say, if you've got animals that are relatively solitary, how can other animals learn from one of their kin being killed when it's 20 or 30 miles away? And even if somehow we could instill fear in the bears that survived, think about a dog that is afraid of us, as opposed to one that is calm and well-disposed towards us. I would much rather be near a dog or around a dog that was unafraid and calm in terms of my own safety, as opposed to a fearful dog. I mean, it may be that a fearful dog or a fearful bear would stay away from us, but given the inevitable encounters, the outcomes will be worse. I think that's just a fundamental of animal behavior. Anyway, I won't go any further other than maybe as far as that.
Yeah, go ahead, David. Yeah, sure.
Well, I think from the point of view of, let's just talk about killing a bear and what's the legal deterrence. We have so many bears that are shot by hunters every year, whether we want to say it's legal or not. There aren't any laws that define how legal it is. And these bears that are killed, this year we already have 4 sows with cubs that were killed, I think in all of them in Wyoming, but at least 3. And so we're already above any kind of limit. And those bears are being shot by people regularly every year. Every year hunters are shooting bears, and in large numbers, over 50. So let's talk about the reality of that. Have those bears been scared away from hunters? No. They're still around, they're still hyperphagic, and they're still going to be around hunters. So shooting them to make them afraid of people is obviously not happening. They're shooting them all the time. So that's just a stupid story.
Well, and just to be clear, it's big game hunters pursuing elk for the most part.
Right. It's the ungulate hunters.
relieve gut piles.
Yeah. In terms of can you elaborate more on the food depletion issue and if there's any scientific studies of what they're eating and how they're compensating and how that's having an effect on their long-term viability?
Well, there's unambiguous evidence that with loss of 70% of all the cone-producing whitebark pine in the ecosystem in a short 10-year period, loss of functionally the extirpation of cutthroat trout as a food, that there is unambiguous evidence that they're eating more meat. And this is at the same time that we've seen fairly dramatic declines in numbers of elk in the Yellowstone ecosystem. Elk herds are over objective just about everywhere else, but in Yellowstone we've seen a fairly substantial decline. So at the same time that bears are relying all the more on meat, there's less of the native meat on the hoof, hence this, and the trends in numbers of bears dying because of conflicts over livestock encounters with big game hunters is also unambiguous. The one other food they're turning to, the other remaining of what I call the big four foods, is army cutworm moths. We have an X number of sites up in the alpine. It's remained fairly static over time. And then you look at the number of bears on those sites, and it's puttered along, and all of a sudden we've seen this spike. So I don't doubt that bears are going to moths as well. And by contrast, that is actually a fairly safe food because that is in some of the most remote parts of the ecosystem.
Right.
But nonetheless, this turn to meat has resulted in a fairly dramatic increase in total mortality of bears, and this, what looks like an incipient downward trend to the population, and because of lag effects in terms of recruitment of young and so forth, you don't see an immediate registration of that kind of mortality in terms of bear numbers. It usually plays out over a 10-year period after that.
Yeah, right.
Deirdre and Judy, I have heard that one of your group has won one of the Wyoming hunt permits. Is that either of you, and what do you intend to do with it?
So our group applied for tags in the area 1 to 6, which is the area most immediately in the surround of Grand Teton and Yellowstone National Park. And 10 tags were issued for that area 1 to 6, and our group actually did succeed in winning 2 of those tags. So one of the winners is Tom Mangelson, who is a very well-known wildlife photographer and has made our bear 399 famous, and her cub 615, who I cared about. And the other one is a woman named Kelly Mayer, and she's number 2. So if actually there is a hunt, which we pray there isn't, Kelly will most likely go out and she will shoot with a camera. And so will Tom Mangelson. So we will have 20 of the 60 days that one could potentially be trophy hunting the bear in our region. We will have 1/3 of those days with hunters who are shooting them with a camera, not a gun.
What did that cost?
Because they were both residents and magically of Teton County, Wyoming, $603 each? Yes. One thing I will say is, though, that did make us as non-consumptive users of wildlife or participants in wildlife management consumptive, because we have tags. Our group's friends or associates who now have hunting tags have the tags. And anybody with a hunting tag can go out and decide to shoot or not. They can decide that the game is too far away, it's not the right size, it's not the right sex, it's not the right age, and not shoot. So any hunter has the right to shoot or not. So we are consumptive users now, which I am saying gives us more of a seat at the table on what we have to say about Wyoming wildlife and how they should be managed. And I would very much oppose any attempt to strip us of that right to purchase these tags again.
Thank you, Deirdre. Questions?
I have one more question regarding other ways that the bear could potentially be relocated, and if the states are doing anything to help spread those genes around. And sometimes the glacier bears would be, there was a problem bear in Glacier, it was moved over to the Yaak Range, over the Yaak area. when I was in school years ago at the University of Montana. So is there anything that is happening to help this fragmentation issue, habitat fragmentation?
Yeah, I mean, the states will say nice things about connectivity and the bigger picture, but one of the really important issues that one of the attorneys is litigating is the fact that post-delisting, the states don't have authority over habitat. They have nothing to say to the Forest Service, public lands managers. And so if you have a species that has huge home ranges and has significant habitat requirements, and yet the states who are now in charge don't have real authority to make the Forest Service do the right thing, then what's the hope? So the words are nice, but it's a hollow promise on the part of the states. And I would say that Montana has gone a little further than Wyoming or Idaho by, at least more embracing the idea of connectivity than either Wyoming or Idaho. And Montana's done something else. I mean, Montana, because there are populations in Glacier and shared Yellowstone population, Montana works a lot along the Rocky Mountain front, east of Glacier, on coexistence. They work a lot on making the world a friendlier place in communities surrounding the parks. And Johnny Arlene and I were visiting about the tribes are working a lot, the Salish Kootenai and the Blackfeet. There's a lot of effort going on. So the question that some of us have is, why aren't we harvesting the lessons of coexistence and spreading them out to places like the Upper Green River in Wyoming, which is a big mortality sink right now near Pinedale, which needs some help with the livestock conflicts. Why aren't we spreading the lessons of farmers and ranchers and other people coexisting, instead of just saying we're going to turn it over to the states so they can have a hunt? I mean, that's not really a solution. And if you look at Europe, I mean, David's got a great blog on our website, Grizzly Times. There are like 6,000 brown bears in Romania, and they decided a couple years ago not to trophy hunt bears. It's a poor European country. And they put us to shame. We've got maybe 1,800 total in the lower 48 states, and the brown bears, same thing, Ursus arctos as the grizzly bear here. There's so many more of them. So clearly, for thousands and thousands of years, people have figured out how to make peace with bears. Similarly, just ask Johnny, about our ancient connections with these animals. Of course, we can coexist. The question is, will we?
If I can sort of not detract from a really important message or point you made, I think your question had to do as much as anything about translocation to enhance genetic health.
Sure.
Or maybe not.
Yes, that's just, because as you were saying earlier, that's one of our problems with the Yellowstone population is it's not being able to get outside of its normal area.
And sorry, go ahead.
No.
But it is the most genetically impoverished population of grizzly bears in the mainland North American continent. So it's an issue. But I think what's overlooked is how much of a logistical effort that would be, because it's not about just dropping a bear in.
Right.
The Cabinet Mountains have shown that you drop bears in and most of them die or leave, and they don't reproduce successfully. So the rate of success for translocated bears is actually quite low. So to achieve that infusion of genes that is deemed desirable, you'd probably be needing to dump in 20 bears during any given decade. That's a lot of bears coming from some place and a lot of expense. And if you read the Montana Grizzly Bear Management Plan, the Wyoming Grizzly Bear Management Plan, they are wringing their hands saying, we don't have nearly enough money to implement grizzly bear management, and we will never get the money we need from selling hunting licenses. So it begs a question, where are the states going to get this money, even if that were a feasible operation to undertake?
The science of it is incredibly inefficient. It doesn't have a filter of natural selection. You're picking random animals, or game managers are picking random animals, kidnapping them from their native ecosystems and bringing them into strange places. Of course, there's going to be enhanced mortality, but there's also going to be the ones who survive will have not gone through that gauntlet, that filter of navigating around people's bird feeders and gardens to get to the new place. It's It's sloppy, it's inefficient, it's bad science, and it's not the way we want to do things in Montana ethically. I mean, a grizzly bear is not a trout from a fishery. A grizzly bear is something that covers great distances through great hardships and finds a place where it wants to live because it loves it there. And that's why we're defending them so hard. And you know, shame on Idaho and Wyoming for not, but we're leading the way in Montana. They're not ready to be delisted.
Yeah,
Mr. Arlene, the chairman of the Salish Kootenai tribes at the last IGBC meeting noted that his father killed a grizzly bear, and he was wondering what had happened to the hide. Can you tell us a little more about the community's traditions of dealing with bears, what they did with them, how they dealt with bears that were threatening or were otherwise imposing on you?
My great-grandfather, he was a successful hunter. And one time he was hunting near the reservation line on horseback, and he was coming back down the hill to camp. And the grizzly bear stood up. And this is the sign for, Indian sign for grizzly bear. They mark their, on the trees, their sign. And that's their territory, their big territory. You put them off someplace else, they'll come back to their territory. But my great-grandfather had an encounter with this grizzly. The grizzly stood up, was challenging him. And my great-grandfather got off the horse and he talked to him in Indian. He says, I didn't come here to get you. I'm not here to look for you. I'm not hunting for you. I'm hunting for my family. Just like you are. You're hunting for your family. So, but if you want to fight, he says, I have a weapon here that I can hurt you. And he said that grizzly bear got down and walked away. And that's what he told me. He says, you don't have to be afraid of them. Just talk to them. There's so much fear today in this world. The tiger shark, the man-eating shark, and everything else. And we create this. The movies create this. And we're so afraid of things. A long time ago, let me get back to a long time ago how that world was with the people. They knew that all the animals were there to prepare. When the animals were ready to separate, to go their different directions, they had a meeting. And they said, we're going to go to these different places and wait for a human to come and find us. As I said before, when that kid was 12 years old, he becomes a man. And the elders seem to know that at 12 years old, you're started to get into temptation, different things. And so the parents will send this child, a boy, to the mountain maybe, on a vision quest, without any weapons, any food, no water, but instructions with sage, his smudge that he has to keep himself concentrated on why he's sitting on that mountain. And the people are hoping that this child will get a gift, that one of these animal spirits around, water spirit, rock, plants, might come down and have pity on this child and give it a song. And these things here, that they had so much faith in the animal, they didn't worry giving them a weapon or so. They had faith in the mountain lions wouldn't bother them, the bears. That's how much trust that they had a long time ago. If we could kind of reach back into that era and teach our children not to be afraid of things, you know. This world was prepared for us, for all of us. And we kind of control, we take over, we put a fence around her, no trespassing. The bears can't read those. You know, maybe what we should do, maybe have a education aside for grizzly bears so they can learn to read, you know. Maybe we should say this is a dump, keep out of the garbage, you know. We kind of cause all of this. We moved them around. We're just disturbing Mother Nature, and we should just leave Mother Nature alone. People up on the Flathead Lake, nice lake, good fish. So they decided to put some kokanee salmon in there. Oh, it was nice, good salmon all over. So they decided to help the salmon out. They gave them some shrimp. And the shrimp ate the salmon eggs. No more salmon up there. Then they put in this big Mackinaws. Now they're having derbies up there trying to get the Mackinaws out. Human beings trying to do something. Crazy. Leave them alone.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Yeah. So thank you all for coming, and we'll be around if there's any further questions or you want to chat some more. So thank you, Johnny and Rick and Doug and David and Deirdre and Judy. Yeah. So thank you all.